The grace of Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Amen. Many of you know I used to work for Apple just about 8-9 years ago. And one of the things you have to do when you work there is, regardless of where you're stationed, whether it's in the front of the store, trying to help people figure out what they need or don't need, or in the middle of the store, trying to help people get appointments to fix their stuff, or in the back of the Genius Bar, one of the things you always have to be able, ready and willing to do is reset people's expectations. Right? Because people aren't often, when they walk into an Apple store, aware of the protocol of things. And if they are aware, maybe they're trying to ignore it, but your job as an employee is not to allow them to ignore it. And so whether I was in the front or in the middle, right, somebody would inevitably walk up and say, hey, my phone's not working, my iPad's not working. And so my job was to reset expectations, right? I understand, I'm sorry, this is how we handle it, right? I made an appointment, so on and so forth. And most of the time, people were very amenable to that reality. I'd say most of the time, because it wasn't all of the time. Right? Inevitably, there would be a customer or two who would come in, and as I'm resetting their expectations, right, you could just see the frustration in their face get worse and worse. And more often than not, people would think they were being clever and saying something unique when they said what I'm about to tell you, but it wasn't really clever and it wasn't really unique. And what they would say as they're frustrated is, do you know how much money I spend in here? Yes, I do. Now, I never said this to them, right? Because that would not be helpful in a circumstance. But actually, in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, you spend, X, and so does everyone else, right? $1,000, $2,000 is not a small amount of money, but it is a small amount of money in an Apple store, right? It's a tiny bit, and it doesn't grant you any sort of special rights to jump to the head of the line, even if you think it does. Now, even in those situations, things would typically grow calm, but there were always one or two who eventually would be screaming at a manager because they were so upset, and would holler from the top of their lungs, I spend X, Y, and Z, and every employee knows, and so does the guy who just checked out. Right? That didn't stop us from, complaining about customers. Right? We couldn't complain about them in the back room. They complained about us to our face half the time. Right? And everybody in this room knows what it means to complain about something. Right? Either it's your kids complaining about what you made for dinner, or it's your spouse complaining about how much money you spent, or maybe it's a fellow member complaining about how things are going on around here. Right? Let's not pretend that's never happened. Right? Where maybe the vote doesn't go the way we want it, so now we're going to start whispering in the narthex, in the services. We never call that complaining, but that's what it is. Right? We're all very familiar with what it means to complain, and we're all very familiar with the reasons why we complain about whatever it is we're complaining about. Our Old Testament text, the one that Baird was teaching the kids and that was read, right, is one of the most absolutely bizarre stories in the Old Testament. Right? I mean, it's here are, God's children, Israel, right? He has brought them out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. They have been to the mountain, they've received the law, right? And now they're not on good terms. They're wandering through the wilderness, and they're doing what they do best. Complaining about it. Right? This isn't the first instance in Numbers or in the Old Testament where God's people are complaining about their situation. It happened in Exodus. It's happened 4 times before we get to this point. So they're complaining, right? We've got no food, no water. Only they do have food. They just loathe the food. And so they're just, it's one thing after another. And so it's like God goes from 0 to 100 in about 2 seconds. And rather than trying to talk to the people, I'm just going to send fiery serpents. Right? I mean, it's like, okay, you want to complain? Here are angry snakes. Now, that does seem to be quite a bit out of God's character, but it's what happens, right? And these snakes, these serpents, when they bite people, the people end up dying. And then people start to get the message. Oh, maybe this is our own fault. Maybe these snakes are coming to us, because we were out there complaining about the gifts that God has given us, right? Maybe we're out there, maybe this is our fault. So they go to Moses and they ask him to ask God to take the snakes away. And God responds by saying, all right, Moses, put one up on a pole, and if somebody looks at it, they'll live. Now, I'm sure all of us have several questions about what is going on here, right? Not the least of which is, what is a fiery serpent? Now, just to further complicate things, you all will pretty much know what the word fiery is in Hebrew. Seraphim. Now, explain this. What is a seraphim serpent, right? What is the connection we're supposed to make here? It's kind of mind-boggling. And anybody who says they know exactly what the thing was, they're lying. Nobody knows, right? Everybody makes a guess. We can get pretty close because we know what a serpent is, and we can sort of get the idea, right? But there are no shortage of artist portrayal of these fiery serpents, and half of them look like fire-breathing mini dragons, right? Because it's such a foreign concept to us. Now, that's not the only question we're asking. Why is it that God just responds so quickly, so out of character? And the text doesn't tell us. And we don't get the answer to those kinds of questions. I'm sure there are other questions you have about the text. Probably the most important one, though, is, what does this have to do with me? Now, I would not suggest to you that if you complain to God, he's going to send fiery serpents your way on the basis of this text. I don't think that's the point. But just as Baird made the turn, right? Just as I'm about to make the turn, we're following the path of Jesus, who made the turn first in the Gospel of John, to say, hey, just as that serpent was lifted up to grant life, so too will I. Right? So just as God's people rebelled and God gave them something to look at to grant life, in this serpent situation, God has done for us in the person and work, in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. He has lifted him up on the cross for all to see. Right? So maybe that's kind of what we're supposed to take away from this. Maybe it's about retraining our vision to, instead of looking all around at the things we would rather complain about, right? Whether it's the color of the carpet, or how this person treated us, or what's going on here week in and week out. Or maybe, we're far too quick to spurn the gifts that God has given us in this place, that we don't look up and see the ultimate thing that binds us together, Christ himself. Because that's ultimately the point. God doesn't take away the snakes. Did you catch that in the narrative? He doesn't actually remove the problem, but he sends them something to grant life in the midst of the problem. It's a problem, he said, sure, but he doesn't just remove it. And the same is true with you and I, whether we want to admit it or not. God doesn't just remove the problem, right? Our stubbornness, our hard-heartedness, our hard-headedness. He doesn't just pull us out of the equation. He gives us something to cast our eyes upon, that we may stop looking inward and start looking at the one thing that matters, the one person who grants life eternal. That's what this text today is all about. Not that God takes away the thing you're complaining about, but that he gives you something to look at. And so often we would rather keep complaining, right? And even if the complaints are far more warranted than they were in the text, right? Maybe we're complaining about the fact that we have cancer. It's a complaint that's worth complaining about. I'm not trying to make light of it. Maybe we're complaining about the fact that we have trouble in our marriages and trouble at home or trouble in society. There are certainly things all of us can complain about, whether it's outside these walls or inside this place. And I count myself among you when I say I complain far too much than I should. But those things, right? Those things are not what define us. What we want something to be is not the gift that we've often been given. Just because we think something should work a certain way, and maybe it should work a certain way, doesn't mean it's going to work a certain way. So rather than complain, even if the complaints are warranted, we look to what God has given us in the person and work of His Son, Jesus Christ. We look to the gifts He gives over and over and over again, week in and week out, that water, that bread and wine, that word preached. Those are the things that we should be casting our gaze upon. Because those are the things that grant life. Even if we're justified in these complaints, those things don't give life. No, there's only one thing that gives life. One person who gives life. And that is the one who was lifted up for all to see. The one who was beaten and bloodied and died on a pole outside of the city. The one whose body was laid in a tomb and days later walked out again. He is the one who grants life in the midst of chaos. He is the one who grants life eternal when you're looking at a situation that doesn't seem to be getting any better. He is the one who unifies His church even when all of us have 6,000 different ways we think something should work. It's all about Him, what He has given, and what He has done. So let us look on Him.